I'm really pleased and honored to introduce you this panel, which is the first of our 2 days. I would like to deeply thank for their availability and support Mrs. Giovanna Gentile Ferragamo from Ferragamo. Raffaello Napoleone, Chief Executive, Pitti, Immagine. Sara Sozzani Maino, Vogue Italia, Deputy Director of Special Projects and Head of Vogue Talents and Nazionale della Moda Italiana, International Brand Ambassador. And Antonio Mancinelli, Fashion Critic and Senior Editor, Marie Claire Italia, that will drive the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
On the theme, Predicting the Future of Fashion, Heritage as a Tool. We have a slide to project. Thank you.
Can we begin? Yes. Okay, thank you for being here, and thank you for being such attentive audience. So I'm very honored to be here, and personally I'm very honored because I was a student of academia in the, I don't know, 2 years before Christ. But, so I'm very happy to be here. I'm the senior editor of Italia, Marie Claire, and I'm very honored. She doesn't need any presentation. To be with me, Mrs. Giovanna Gentile Ferragamo, of the house of Salvatore Ferragamo, and Raffaello Napoleone. Raffaello Napoleone is the CEO of Pitti, Immagine, and at the same time is one of the most intellectual and industrial. She works on both sides of fashion industry and fashion culture. And Sara is a very nice colleague. She's like an hunter. She's always all around the world. She's like a globetrotter of style because she's, I don't know, in any juries of new designer, of in Australia, in Asia, everywhere. She's always with the case in the hand. So thank you for being here. And you know, I'm a journalist. Journalists are very, you know, bad people and a little bit nasty. And I followed before all the lecture. They were so wonderful, they were so beautiful, they were so interesting that I asked myself, I want to begin with a little bit provoking question. Because when Barbara proposed me heritage as a tool, my first thought was, I'm a fashion critic since 30 years. Okay, heritage as a tool to build the future of fashion, but in a certain way, can we consider, especially for the big brands, for the luxury brand, heritage as a tool and contemporary as a burden, as a weight? I will understand why it rose to me this question. Because sometimes I go to the shows, I go to the show in Milan, I go to the show in Paris, sometimes in New York, and sometimes we ask ourselves, the journalists, the fashion critics, we see revivals of the 60s, of the 70s, of the 80s. We don't understand, we don't deeply understand if it is a tribute, an homage, an heritage. So, I want to begin with this first question, not provoking, but in a certain way to discuss heritage, like in Ferragamo case, but I want to know the opinions of all my guests about this theme of heritage as a tool and sometimes as a weapon or a burden. So, what do you think, Mrs. Ferragamo?
Thank you. It's a big question, and I try to have a short answer, if you like.
Yes, but we can help you.
Okay. Well, the heritage in my case was quite heavy because at a very young age of 17, I started in the company, the ready-to-wear collection. Up to then, it was only shoes, with my father, of course, who founded the company. And I had this big challenge of starting a new section, a new direction in the company. Of course, I was starting up. I could not start down, which I usually suggest to everyone to start slow, and then build up. But my father was already very well known. His name was famous in all the world, so I could not afford mistakes. And that is something which is quite heavy as an heritage, because when you're very young, when you start a new job, you need also to go through mistakes to learn. So I was very, very tensed about this. But besides this, it was also a great honor because I was lucky enough to start high, and that is not for everyone. So the heritage has really two faces on that side.
Yes, and I think that in Ferragamo case, especially in your case, I'd like to remind to the audience, here it is my friend, my beloved friend Stefania Ricci. Stefania Ricci is the curator of Museo Salvatore Ferragamo, and now in Florence there is this beautiful exhibition of Ferragamo called Sustainable Thinking, about sustainable fashion. And the most admired thing is that you can see some shoes of the 30s,
yes,
of the 40s that Salvatore Ferragamo made, and they look like something invented yesterday or today, because they were done with recycled,
any material he could find, especially
yes,
at the time after the war, when it was there were not leathers available, there were not the iron pieces that he used to put inside the shoe, in the arch of the shoe, to make sure that the heel would not fall off. And that is the time when he invented the wedge, just to exclude that problem. So, I mean, even in the necessity, you really can create something very new, very unusual, and these days it is so fashionable.
Yes.
We even reproduce in limited editions some of the shoes that are shown in our museum, that are in our archives, because the people that go there and see these things, they want them now. So that means also that a very strong creative sense does not last only one season, it can last very, very long, and it can come back. As you were saying, sometimes we have influence about the 70s, the 60s, the 80s, but it's not like copying, it's something that, you want to go back to,
yes,
and
like
reinterpret in the contemporary
items.
way.
Yes, and we will come back on the concept of long-lasting items. And I want to ask to Raffaello, you work on the most important menswear fair in the world, and you organized all the part of the fair. At the same time, Pitti Immagine invites every season new designer, every season new names, and if you stay in Italy for more days, Pitti Immagine and Raffaello Napoleone too, they organized a beautiful exhibition in Corridoio Vasariano, Palazzo Pitti, called Sì, ma romanzo breve. It's a short story, a short novel about the menswear, and this is the first space to build the first museum of menswear in the world. So how can you relate all the houses that make part of Pitti and this operation of Talent Scout that you and your team make every year?
Thank you very much. In fact, we are very lucky because, in fact, our company was born in the 50s, thanks to a gentleman, the name was Giovanni Battista Giorgini, that you know quite well, at least the Italian knows who he was. And in fact, he has been from the very beginning as a person looking for new designer and new ideas. Italian fashion started in February '51. Thank you to his vision. He invited in Florence. Of course, I'm speaking about Florence, inviting 6, 7 designers, 3 from Milan, 3 from Rome, and 1 from Florence, asking them to conceive a fashion completely different from the French fashion. In that period, all the Italian couturier used to buy the sketches in Paris that invite the customer, saying, look at the new collection, doing some corrections, and then sell French fashion. And in fact, this is our heritage. We too, being a trade show organizer, we have an heritage that is to offer to the market. In that case, was mainly the consumer at the beginning, but the distribution was mainly in Europe, in Italy, and the United States in that period. Now we have to look at the huge markets worldwide. But what we do is always looking for new suggestions from a company point of view, and so we do a lot of research. And we are following the same kind of strategy from a designer point of view. And this is a key point for our success. We decided, thanks to Marco Olivetti, that accepted to be chairman of Pitti in 1988, we decided to use properly the image, the positioning today of Florence, to set up what is today the strength, the real strength of Florence, that is museum, culture, good taste, something that the other fashion towns has not in the same way so strong and so well recognized worldwide. And so we started with main exhibitions, at the very beginning about Italian fashion, then speaking about the first sex was adolescence, having Raf Simon like curator, and then about sports, about the male elegance, about the Italian image worldwide. So we did so many events. And so coming back to the subject of this meeting, in fact, heritage is also important if you have it and you use it in a clever way, in a very balanced way. It's a strength on which you can build up something very contemporary. So it's a positive tool. It's just a question of fantasy, of creativity, of positiveness. When you think that your business is very close to slow and you see difficulties of market, you have to look back, to look to the others, to look at your history. Heritage means also history, yes. And try to do a different way. I'm closing with, I like very much sailing, and so I sail quite a lot in my life, and I know that when the wind is the same from everybody, and you want to win, by definition you have to look for another wind, taking some risk, but you have to change the direction. And this is what a fashion has to do. It is doing now. Also, speaking about sustainability, it is another major issue that is now a major issue on which everybody has to work.
And Sara, you go all over the world. How different countries relate themselves to this subject? When you go, I don't know, in Paris, in London, or in New York too, or all over the world, how the heritage is perceived? And Italian heritage.
Well, Italian heritage, it's a lot to say, but yes. When I travel, I mean, I think it's more important to see more the new countries, because obviously speaking about Paris or London or Milan, which is fantastic, but I think it's very interesting to see countries where maybe 10 years ago you wouldn't think of conceiving talent and fashion, and so traveling to Africa or even Asia, which obviously there's the Japanese fashion that came out really early, but then it kind of stopped. So when, especially in Africa, I see that this heritage is very strong, but then it's very important to bring it forward, because then when you go to countries such as Africa or Asia, or India even, it's very strong, the heritage of the tradition, and it's not easy to bring it in a more modern and more sophisticated way. So I think it becomes a tool to use and to send also messages, because obviously fashion has a tool of giving communication to everyone, but I think it's very important also to keep the traditions and bring them forward, which then links it obviously to the Italian heritage, which is very important. And I think that going back obviously to the Museum Ferragamo or Pitti, it's something that they continue to do, and I think it's important, because then nowadays the new generation with the tools of social network kind of forget, memories is erased. So I think it's important that exhibitions like the one in Pitti of menswear, people can understand really when menswear began, where it is, and what maybe is missing, like the fact of not having anymore this strong heritage of artisanal, which I think it's very important. And Ferragamo is something that brings it forward. And I think this is very important. So I think this is the real heritage about it, of bringing things forward and not leaving them where they are. And this is fundamental for what we're doing now, especially like for the sustainability part. And I think this is the most important thing of the heritage. So I see it as a tool, and then you can use it as a weapon, but the weapon is because you have to make the difference. And, think that, as Raffaello was saying, changing wind, because to be comfortable, you don't do nothing. So you have to always choose not the easy road, but the most difficult one.
Thank you. I think that each of my guests told a very key word, very important. Mrs. Ferragamo said, long-lasting thing. Mr. Raffaello said we need a new, clever way to transmit heritage. And Sara said to look forward and not to keep inside in your borders your heritage. So what I ask you to all of you, it's how can make contemporary an heritage so important that I was kidding before, but it's a real richness of Italian taste, Italian culture, maybe put into new languages, and put your values, put your DNA into new forms, or new forms to communicate them.
Okay. Well, it's maybe paragone, a similitude. A comparison could be like looking to a plant. A plant has some roots in the earth, but then it develops outside, and it can be given the shape you want. If you leave it as is, can go like wild, but otherwise you can shape it and do it and let it grow at the best. So I think it's something similar also in heritage. You have to stick to your roots, and this is where the heritage comes in. You really have to look at that and build on those. I think that more than referring to what has been done in the past, I think you have to capture the mission that is inside. You have to capture the philosophy of that type of creativity. Like in my story, my father was extremely launched in creativeness, I mean, he would not, he would dare anything. And in those days, all of the things he has done, so colored and so full of very strange materials, and the wedges and the very high heels, were really revolutionary at the time. I don't even know how some women in those days could really buy them and wear them. They were so advanced. That means that you have to risk and you have to go on, never forgetting where you come from, but very clearly you have to know where you want to go. And of course I think that where you want to go is where the whole world is going. So these days you have really to look at what the needs are, what the request is, what the life is requesting from you, because it has been. There are so many changes every day, I would say, about the way you live, the way you buy things. It's like an investment even sometimes that you do. You know, you want things that you like to wear, that you feel good with. It's not about a diktat of fashion anymore. It's like individual fashion. So this is one good point about it. And you have to interpret all of this, and of course also taking care about the nature and not destroying, continue to destroy our planet, and so also with a very, very wide open eye to everything which is sustainability and respect for the planet.
Yes, that's very important, because I always say to my students when I teach that houses like Ferragamo, Louis Vuitton, Hermes, or Gucci, now we perceive them as classic. But at the beginning, they were absolutely avant-garde. They were like aliens at the beginning. Yes. That's very important, because now we perceive them as something strong with very important history. But at the beginning, they were very attached to the reality of the time. Okay.
And what about communication, Raffaello, of heritage today in the era of social network, of this global world in which we seem connected? Maybe we are not, but we seem all connected.
Big question. In fact, we touched the point also this morning about internet and Instagram, all the rest. For sure, it's a major issue. It has been always a major issue. But the impact a few years ago was mainly through paper. Today, you have to be careful in the way you use your word, the image you put on Instagram. If you look at Greta sailing with the Casiraghi sailing boat, I'm coming back to my passion, she has been shooted with a plastic bottle behind her all over the world.
Was scandalized.
She has been criticized for this, and so it's astonishing how important it is. It's a question of rules. It's the change of the rules. You are not speaking anymore like a few years ago to the main markets. And coming back to the 50s, used to be, of course, Italy, Europe, United States, and Japan. Now, when you speak to the planet, to the consumer, to the community of fashion, to everybody. And so it's just a question of finding which is the positioning of yourself, what you want to say, which are your messages. It's, in my opinion, a fantastic option. Much more delicate, very difficult one time. Well, if you do a mistake, it's very tough to do a correction. You have to look in the best way possible to your partners, or if you are with them in the company or outside the company. You cannot anymore just thinking about communication is something between the activities, the division you have in the company. For sure, you have to put yourself in discussion. So rethink what you are communicating. For us, it's a major issue because we are mainly twice a year trade shows, which messages you have to send. Also because we are not selling anything to the market, but we are presenting thousands of companies to 100,000, in fact, buyers. So you need each season to find out a good message, and so you have to follow. And it's very, very competitive, but in the meantime, it's a real privilege. You have also to follow what's happening worldwide in your field, because now, like we said before, we are looking to all the markets, and so we have to take part to the main trade shows worldwide, to the main fashion weeks worldwide. We have to find out, and this is also an answer to the question, what you said before, that we have, in the meantime of the trade shows, major event with the emerging designer or artists like Sterling Ruby. We spoke this morning about Sterling Ruby, that in finally he decided to launch his collection from Florence, because the platform of Florence, it's a platform out of the tension of the fashion weeks, where you are under the focus with other 3-4 designers. And so we need to communicate our positioning, our strategy, our objectives, trying to help designers, exhibitors, offering to the press a good platform of communications.
Good exhibition.
So we have to do what the market is asking, and it's so fast now that we have to change season after season.
Okay. And Sara?
What is the question exactly now? Because I lost track. I mean, communication.
How can we translate into contemporary time the heritage of houses, of luxury houses, of big houses, according to your opinion?
Well, linking to what I do as a job of scouting and everything, I think that the heritage, since it cannot stay back, it has to go forward. Going forward means getting the new generation to understand what's heritage and the importance of bringing it. So I think that, you know, like scouting around the world and supporting designers and creatives is important, but then you have to also have the tool to make them understand what the heritage, what the meaning of heritage is. So I think that big houses have obviously the chance to bring it back, to bring it forward, but then maybe there are other small brands which can't. And I think that the important thing is that the new generation is supported to bring forward this heritage, because it's the only way of keeping things to go on. And I think that the new generation of creatives in general have to have the support. And I think that it's important that we're talking about fashion, so that the fashion system continues to give this message. And obviously, communication-wise, Instagram now it's became the most, I mean, it's over television, it's more powerful than anything else. So I think this is a very important tool, and it's also a very dangerous tool, because we've seen what happened to Greta, you did an example, but to any others, or even us as a magazine, sometimes, I mean, it happened last year that we came out with a cover, we've been criticized because Gigi Hadid didn't seem to be white but black, so you were making blackface, so it was a huge drama. And this didn't happen in the past. I mean, you just kept it by yourself, your comments. Maybe you went to the restaurant, to the bar, and spoke to friends and saw you say the cover and everything. Now it's all on a big stage. And I think that obviously it's fascinating, it's important, because it's very quick to communicate, but at the same time, you can give the wrong message in a second. So even we as communicators, sometimes you wanted to feel to do something very natural, but then you have to stop and think, because if you use the wrong word, it's the wrong word. If you use the wrong person, it's the wrong person. Which, in a way, it's very frustrating, because there's not anymore that freeness that gave you the chance of doing things with more courage, and also doing things that you would think impossible, even though I think in a certain way you have to do them anyways and don't care about, you know, what people think. I think nowadays people don't do things because they think about what people would think about, oh, I did this. So sometimes you just have to think, who cares, and do it and get your responsibility. And I think this is what people today in this room are doing, is that they're getting responsibility of doing things which maybe you wouldn't do, but I think that the Instagram tool is fundamental, but it's also very dangerous. I'm still in a position of not knowing if I like it or not. I think it's excellent, but at the same time it's very scary, because then there's also all that negative part of it, which, you know, can be also this kind of very aggressive language that people use against people, and nobody can do anything because it's in the internet, so you cannot really prove it. So it's kind of tricky.
Yes, but I think that internet or the web or the social media are not enemies. They are, I don't know, something you can feel with some meaning. So they are not friends, not neither enemies. They are something that we can use, put into something that belongs to the DNA, to the code of the house. And I think about Ferragamo, and I don't know, short movies on your website, and the way to communicate your history. Because I think that the new generation, the famous Z generation, there is they are younger than the millennial, maybe they are very interested in knowing the history. And I don't know, the example of Ferragamo, that you made short movies on, or your website is very rich and full of news, of history, so you can go deep into the history if you want, or if you like the bag, okay, you can buy the bag.
Well, yes, because heritage is not only the one that you have on your own, only as a direct way, like in my case. I inherited a company that was started for my father and all of the rest. But heritage is also what anyone can get from the history of what has happened before. And I think this is even wider than what I see with my eyes in my own family. So it is very, very important. We see more and more interest in from young people, especially from young people, to know more about us, to know more about my father, how he started. Many times his story, his life seems more like it's a fairy tale instead of a real life, And of course, through his book, the autobiography, and through many movies, as you say, or small movies that we have produced in our company to let people know and understand what we are about, has been of a great interest about the youngers. And I think we have to feed this wish, this desire, this attitude of all the young students, of all young people, to learn about our story, our past, and I think it is their life to live, and the more they build it on history, on lifestyle, on whatever has been successful in the past, and the better they will afford all of the energies that they have to also I mean, they also have a lot of hard work to do.
Yes.
So it will be easier if they have something to have as a base.
Yes, because I think using their language now, the language of today.
Absolutely.
Yes, the same question I want. It's first for you too, because I think there is a subtle line which divides citation, inspiration from history. And so how do you transmit, how do you think to transmit history? Because really the consumer today wants to know where the item is, it is done, who made my clothes, all the sustainability things. So I think there is a great desire to know the roots of each items and to know the heritage and the history, as you said before.
Yes. Fortunately, we are not producing any collection, and so we don't have to tell to our customers or the press where we produce something. Of course, we have to take care about the way the company communicate during Pitti. This issue is a very interesting issue, more and more interesting and influential, on which a lot of companies are now obliged to sign certification about the origin of the raw materials, who did, which kind of nobilization has been done to the fabrics where it has been produced. And in this will be for sure a tendency more and more important for the manufacturer. Before we spoke about fast fashion and fashion less fast. That means the classical one, if you want, with a high-end quality. But both they need, if they want to sell to multi-brand shops or department store, that they can guarantee the process of the production. We are thinking what we can do. Also because, generally speaking, the backbone of the Italian manufacturing industry is made mainly by very small companies. I don't know if you had these numbers in your head, but the average of employees in the 75,000 manufacturing company, I'm speaking in this case just for clothing, is 8 employees. That means very small. This is the reason why we have very strong cluster districts where each one does a part of the production. And finally, it's a multi-thousand area producing, but generally speaking, each company is very small. And so this process is a process on which the small companies that used to exhibit at Pitti need to be helped. Sometimes they have really a nightmare in following all the new rules applied. If you also want to export to China, there are a lot of rules or major obstacles. And so from an association point of view, from bilateral agreements between nations, this has to be one of the main strategies to follow to help companies, small companies that are really so strong to afford the markets.
Okay. Sara? Okay, the question was...
I'm joking. No, I was joking. No, I mean, I think that, most is said, but I think it's very important that nowadays, going back to sustainability and to do better things for a better future, is that obviously the theme of sustainability can be equivalent to be not boring or not understandable. So I think here it's the communication that's very important, and I'm working on a lot of sustainable projects, and I think you have to do it easy, like as if you're explaining it to a 2-year-old boy. And I think this is what happens, brands need to do to consumers, because consumers don't have the slightest idea, unless you're very interested in this subject, of how a t-shirt or how clothing are done. So I think that you have to go back to the roots and really explain it as a 2-year-old boy and explain what happens. Obviously, it's very important that then brands are certificated, which that's something in the back end fundamental. But then when you go into the shop, you have to be really easy of explaining why this t-shirt costs 15 euros and not 2 euros. And we as Vogue, so in the media, I think it's fundamental right now that any person that has the power to communicate and give media is to begin just to say the future now is just green, sustainable, responsible, use whichever word you want. And you have to use your tools to explain people. But these tools sometimes have to be really easy, because then unfortunately, most of the people maybe don't care, or they're not interested, or they not even have the tools of how to approach this subject. So going back to the heritage, it's always about bringing it forward, but in a time of explaining it very easy. And I think this is very important. And we as media, me as working as Vogue, I think we have a major responsibility of giving a very, very strong message. And this could be, we are image magazine, so it's through images, but also through examples. And we have to be the example for the future. So I think this is very important. But it also has to be simple and not, boring, because sometimes things can be boring, and people don't have time. They don't concentrate. You were talking about videos. A video has to be between 30 seconds and a minute, because after a minute, people are not even paying attention to what they're seeing. It's not a nice message to say, but it's the truth. So you have to catch the attention of people very quickly and give them the reason why they should stop more than 1 minute. So this, I think, it's very important, and this is what we should do.
Okay. And the last question, because we have to close, but this is a big question, because I think that I spoke with Mrs. Ferragamo, and we were agree that the Italian heritage, generally speaking, is about quality of materials, very good taste, a study of shapes, of lasting items. So at the end, the slogan, buy less, buy better, maybe could be the future in fashion and heritage. How can we deal? Okay, Ferragamo is an independent house, so we don't make part, you don't make part of this multinational of luxury, but it's how it's possible to deal buy less, buy better, commitment with this multinational that they have to make money. And I remember when I began 30 years ago, we have 2 seasons, autumn, winter, and spring, summer, and 2 seasons for menswear, the same. And now, even for the luxury brand, we have 6 seasons, cruise collection, a pre-fall, and so how it's possible? I know this is a big question, but how it's possible to make reality buy less, buy better in a world based on economic amount, economic earning?
Last but not least is a question. Well, I must say that we always, in our the years we've been working, I always say, take the plural, because we are a large family, and as you know, all of us have been very much inside the company all the time. And one of our credos was that we wanted really to give our product as value for money. So this is what is at the bottom and at the top of everything. So giving value for money means you have really to produce things that are made with correctly, with very good materials, with very good craftsmanship, and all the ingredients you already mentioned. But also not to be too contemporary, because if you go into fashion which is too advanced, then of course after a while, you know, you will get bored about it, or something else will come out and you will have to take that item off and go for another one. Instead, you want to keep, you want to invest. We want our customers to do their buy as if they were doing an investment in somehow, in some way. And I think that the successful thing is that in the years we have known many customers that collect our things, yes, because they know that the following season they can wear it, accessorizing it a different way, putting it in another manner, but they do keep their clothes and their shoes, of course, for a long time. I must tell you a funny story, a funny episode that happened, but this was like in the middle of the 70s. We have a cousin that in our company takes care about the production and the fit of the shoes and the quality of the shoes and everything else. You know, Raffaello, Jerry, my cousin. And now and then he was going to New York and to the United States to go through our clients and find out if they were happy, whatever was going on or not. So in those times, we're not traveling every day like we do today. You know, it was like 2 trips a year. And so when he was coming back, we as a family were all together asking how things were going, we wanted news, fresh news about how the economics and the sales were doing. And he's very serious in his way, in his life, and in his work, absolutely. So he was like shaking his head down and looking very serious and very depressed. So we were all very, very worried. And so he said, "Jerry, what's happening? What's wrong?" He said, "Our shoes last too long." He was walking on Fifth Avenue. He would not look at faces of people around. He would not look at windows, but just at the feet of the ladies that were walking on the street, you know. And he could see a lot of shoes from Ferragamo, but he knew that they were not the last collection, that was like 2 years before or 3 years before, and still were looking so good. So he was saying, not only they last too long, but they're still looking fantastic. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Joran, Mrs. Joran.
Good question. Buy less. I don't know if we have to buy less, because we are free to choose. We can buy less or more. It depends from us or from our state of mind. That means our here, but generally speaking. In fact, if you look at the worldwide figures, the GDP worldwide is growing, because there are affluent markets, and so the perspective will be also, if now we are living a very difficult moment, for sure in the next 10 years, due to also a growth of the population, we will grow. And so the production has to follow this in a correct way, in a sustainable way, social way, very, very respectful of the children's work or the rest. But generally speaking, in my opinion, it's not this issue, buy less. Also because if you want to buy less, you have a fantastic opportunity that is not just the vintage, but is the second-hand market. Yes. The second-hand market, due to a McKinsey recovery, also a Boston Consulting Group, about more than 30,000 interviews to people spending more than $30,000 per year in fashion. The figures are fantastic, because the turnover worldwide today is $25 billion, growing, and what is extraordinary is, I don't remember all the percentage, but 40%, 42% of what is sold is because the people has no more space in the houses, and so they sell just to buy something new. And this is 42%. Then you have about 23%, yes, because they want to buy, they sell because they want to buy something more fashionable. And now we are around 64, 65%. And I am in the 5%, I'm joking, but the truth, it is people that used to resell what they receive like present.
Yes.
So when you want...
Absolutely.
This is the most interesting part of this market. I'm joking, but generally speaking, yes, this is also another option, a real serious option on which fashion can be, we spoke about before vintage, but can be reutilized and re-put on the market, especially buying Ferragamo shoes that last a lot.
Yes. May I say one thing? And now there is one thing, and there is new words, because it's not no more second-hand, it's pre-loved or pre-owned. Oh my God. But it's the same thing. Eh? The concept is the same.
No,
Please.
I mean, I think they told everything, but the thing is not buying less, but it's also who produces is produced in a conscious way, because it's always going back then to the communication, is that there are brands which decide not to be mass market because they want to pass the heritage and understand that a Ferragamo shoes can last 25 years, even if then it, like a Kelly bag, exactly. And I think that it's very important that there are these kind of examples, but then who has or mass market or produces a lot, I think it's very important that they produce with consciousness and also communicate this, because then it's the only way that people will then buy less, maybe not buy more, but buy more in a conscious way, or something that it's linked to understand, as Raffaello was saying, about what is the wage of people, how they work, and all of the back end that nobody knows, because then we know that there are videos come out, stories come out, but nobody then really matters, because I was reading that the whole problem of wages in Bangladesh, because I was at the summit in Copenhagen, and there was this activist, which I don't remember the name, she said, now in Bangladesh, after 2,000 people died in Rana Plaza, now the wages are getting better. But now, what is the problem? It moved to Ethiopia. So now the problem is Ethiopia, it's not anymore Bangladesh. So the problem is that you need to stop this happening, because, and unfortunately, it's not the people in this room, but who produces in Ethiopia? I mean, there are brands that produce there, so they should stop and do something about it. So this, I think, it's the most important thing. Then in a way I think we could produce much more less, but although in a more conscious way.
Thank you so much. And before to thank my guest, I'd like to make a quote, not mine, of a philosopher called Leibniz, who said, "We have to respect the past because it always been the future of someone else." So, thank you to Mrs. Giovanna Ferragamo, Mr. Raffaello Napoleone, and Sara Sozzani Maino. We are here to answer to your question. And Barbara, if you want to come with us, please.
No, I didn't want to interfere. First of all, thanks to all. It has been really enlightening. Is there any questions from the audience? Can you put on the light, please?
Even without these lights, like
thank you.
In
Any
the
questions?
police station. Yeah.
Mr. Cetan, and then Maria.
Hi, I'm Chetan. I'm from India, of course. So being from the production side of the business, Sara actually mentioned a lot of valid points. Mr. Raffaello, can you see us?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right, that's okay. So she just mentioned briefly that when we do all these exercises of achieving responsible production, doing sustainable exercises to achieve what we need right now, especially after the G7 summit, all the big companies have joined into as combined hands for the sustainable programs. There is a very, very intense exercise needed, this we say from the production side and also maybe from the sales side, is to educating the customer why there will be an end difference in the price levels once we achieve all the sustainable processes, which will ultimately show on the product. Yes, we are pretty sure the product is going to get 200% better, but it will all come at a price at the end of the day. So at the store or online or at the shelf where the end customer is going to buy that product, real education is needed backwards. So when we talk about, let's say, responsible buying, that has to be supported with responsible production. Responsible production has to be supported with responsible designing. Responsible designing has to be supported by responsible sourcing, and so on and so forth. So it's a big chain. We believe from production perspective, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take maybe a couple of decades to fully achieve it. Yes, all the leading brands who people look up to and who people listen to, like Mrs. Ferragamo's family, will certainly lead the program and lead the initiatives. But there is a lot of other, there are a lot of other brands, a lot of other manufacturers which are part of the whole industry, which also have to be looked at in terms of joining hands and educating them. Only then we believe we can achieve this larger platform going forward. So educating the customer, educating the production cycles, educating everybody involved, that ultimately it's going to be a price-driven exercise. How, where, when, we can attain costs, we can produce at a much, better competitive levels, and so on and so forth.
The question, which is the question?
The question is, it's not a question, rather. It's just, adding on to what you said. But you just said briefly, but that's a very, very valid point. The difference between 5 to 15 is what we think it will bog down to. So that also needs to be, looked at seriously, alongside, what we are trying to do in terms of responsible buying. And thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Mary Genevieve Sear. I'm a professor at Parsons in New York City. Sarah, I see you quite a lot at Shanghai Fashion Week, and in the past 2 years it's been quite interesting to see how the young generation is redefining completely what it means to be Chinese. My question relates to, I have a lot of students, for example, they're German and they grew up in Hong Kong, or they're Chinese and they grew up in Spain, and it's very interesting to have this conversation about heritage and what it means for the next generation. So my question is, what is the future of fashion using heritage, but in a time of multiplicities, if you want? You know, a lot of people are traveling, moving around the world as well all the time. So I'm just curious, what do you think?
Well, the thing is that you said it. I mean, there are designers that maybe it's a couple of it's two of them, and one is German and the other one is South African. Well, you already have heritage there because you bring two different cultures and tradition, and in a way, then you develop it in something new that you never had. So I think also that's a way of bringing heritage forward, because obviously, when I go around and travel around the world, I meet a lot of creatives, and obviously there are those creatives that have the chance and the tools to go on, and those who don't, because they have, obviously each designer has its own story, its own heritage, their personal problems, and obviously throughout the years, sometimes I feel like a doctor or a psychological, because they tell you everything about them, which is interesting, but then you also see also the not dark, but negative part of, you know, creatives that would like to go on, but they don't have the tools to go on. So I think that also when it's interesting, because in the past 5 years, or even 10, before, the designers were mostly individual. There was not this thing of doing 2, 3 groups, those were also group designers. And I think this is a way of mixing the heritage and bringing towards. So this is also a more, maybe not modern, but a new way of bringing it. And I think that the cultural clash is very important too. And you know, nowadays you talk about inclusivity, diversity, and already the two words are kind of clashed together in the wrong way, because you're talking about diversity and inclusivity. So I think it's very interesting to see how things happen. I don't know if I answered the question, but it's more or less, I think this is a way of seeing the future of fashion and heritage at the same time.
You talked more about co-creation or collectives in a way of designers as well, coming together a little?
Well, I mean, Miss Ferragamo was saying, she always says us. It's not about individuality. I mean, you do things as a group, and you never do things by yourself. I mean, you cannot think of doing things by yourself. So it's always a group, and also the fact of supporting. So creatives sometimes, you know, get together because they get together for many reasons, but it's also a way of giving a more stronger message too.
Thank you, Sara. So I have a question for the three of you, if I may. I'd like to start with Mrs. Ferragamo. Thank you very much for being here, and we are very happy to have you here. There's a lot of fashion students who are studying fashion design right now in the room. I'd like to know if you could share with us the creative process that your father had in designing shoes, and if you could answer also what is Ferragamo right now doing to keep that innovative approach that your father had, and which is very contemporary today. So then I'll do the 3 questions, and then Raffaello, also for you afterwards, the vision of Pitti Immagine, since it is the most important trade fair for menswear in the world. What's next for Pitti? What are you doing? What are the next projects? And Sara, what do you look when you see so many designers out there in the world? What is identity for you? What are the key aspects which are important for you in talent scouting? Thank you very much.
My father, yes. He was not a designer in the way we think today, sketching and things on paper. He used to take a wood last, reproducing the shoe, and he would either design his motifs on the last directly, or even pull over it pieces of leather or thread or whatever he wanted the shoe to become after. Because he was saying that in that case, he would not lose proportions. You know, talking about shoes, you also have not to forget we talk about fit. It's not like a dress, you know, it's easier to wear. But on a foot, you have to walk. So you have to be comfortable, the feet has to be, they have to be free. And he was very, very, very exigent on that side. So whenever he was designing his new styles, he was doing it directly on a shoe last. I have been watching him so many times. I was a very little girl and I was fascinated. That's something he would do at the end of the day because he was very busy with his work. He didn't have much time to dedicate to design and to think. But at like around 6 o'clock at night, everybody, all the employers would leave, and it was peaceful, no phone ringings, and that was the time he would take like an hour or two just to create. And he had a small basket beside his desk, full of little pieces of leather, of all type of leathers, of course, and ribbons and little pieces of accessories, you know, he would put on and so on. And that basket, I can still have it in my eyes because as a little girl, you know, it was like a dream. If I only could steal it from him and take it home. Very amusing. And the other question was, sorry?
What is the company doing to keep that innovative approach?
Well, we are, yes. Well, we are trying to. You know, our archives are always very open also to our design teams. And there are many times we make some, reunioni, some meetings with them, also trying to show the new ones, the new entries especially, you know. We have to form them to our image and let them know our roots and what are the essential things. It's not about reproducing something that had been done. It's just to capture the type of creativity which is behind the object. You know, it's like a philosophy which is behind. It's always try to do something that has not been done yet. That is the motive that we try to keep alive.
Thank you very much.
Lupo, thank you for your question. I don't know if I can answer very briefly. But generally speaking, I try by points. First of all, we want to be more international, more and more. One of the weakness of the trade shows sometimes is not to be the mirror of exactly what's going on all over the world on all the markets. It's not easy, but generally speaking, this is the key point. Continue the strategy of cultural fashion. That means setting up in the Museo della Moda e del Costume di Palazzo Pitti major exhibition about fashion. We are working with Olivier Sayar. We have a contract for the next 2 years. And we have had in the past many very important and good relations. This is quite useful because it helps also to use the heritage of the companies, of the theme, specific theme, to inspire young designers and also well-established companies. For sure, use Pitti Immagine more and more like service for the companies. Not just from an exhibiting point of view, but also helping them, the small one I was speaking before, the 8 employees companies, to use the tools like digital helped by us. And as you probably know, we have the tutoring area on which we are investing a lot. Now we have a new person in charge, Luca Rizzi, and we are investing. We are now also adding a consultancy, and so we are investing a lot also in this. And then finally, we are also going a bit out of fashion, in the sense fashion will remain the core business, but we are adding a trade show about food, taste. It is very successful, about fragrances. Fragrance is going to open next Friday in Florence. And now we are also launching, we hope successfully, a very clever, in my opinion, trade show about books. The way books are conceived, and so all the process. It's not just a question of putting the books where is something very interesting. Thank you.
No, so your question was saying about what I look into creatives, and well, it's funny because it's the question that everyone asks, which it's always difficult to answer because there's not really like a rule. So for me right now, in this present moment, obviously it's important to have a vision and a message they want to give through their collection. And right now I have to say that when I go to speak to students is that, I mean, brands, we have enough. We don't need more brands, but obviously I'm not saying that designers should stop being designers. So the thing is that right now, I mean, if you decide to open a brand tomorrow, it has to be sustainable. And already that it's something that you can start with a very strong message. But obviously for the past, there was no sustainability, it's obviously the message is very important, what they want to say to the consumer and what's their final aim. And obviously we are in fashion, so even image aesthetic, it's important, which doesn't mean that you have to do something extremely expensive, but also that it's kind of your mirror to explain to someone that you don't have the chance to explain yourself through images, something very clear. And I see many designers, they lose themselves thinking too conceptual, sometimes you have to be straightforward. So the message is very important.
Thank you. Possiamo andare. Thank you so much.